Hello, everyone. It's so good to make your acquaintance. My name is Caleb, or Lawrence, or Caleb W.H, or the wretched human guy on the internet. I'm really not fussy. You can call me whatever you want. Okay, so, how's everyone doing? If you guys probably looked at the title of this video, you're probably a person who is interested in different waves of thought. If you're, or you're interested in Christianity or philosophy, or you're just somehow this guy just popped up on your recommended. First of all, whichever person you may be, I'm glad to make your acquaintance. And I hope that Christ uses this video for your further edification. So, I had been meaning to make this video for a long time. If any of you are subscribed to my channel, you will probably notice that all of my videos, up until this point, I've kind of just thrown people into it. And what you may not know, if you guys really aren't regulars, are the fact that I have a Twitter and a Substack. Not only this, I have the Substack is the publication, but I also have 3 published books, and I am a person that's trying to spread my ideas as a vocation. I'm going to spend this video explaining kind of why I do this and the style in which you will come to know if you guys choose to follow me. First and foremost, I just wanted to say God bless you and thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me as a person who often feels alone or marginalized or different. Just anyone, regardless of if they agree with me or not, I'm very glad that you showed up. One of the things you may notice about my channel, and it's on purpose, is everything that I do is completely unedited. I may start writing scripts. I haven't decided if I'm going to do that yet, but all of this stuff is supposed to be unedited. It's supposed to feel personal. I'm supposed to be speaking to you, dear reader. Because one of the things that I've found to be quite lamentable about YouTube and about theology and about philosophy is a lot of the people that I genuinely care about, truly marginalized people, misunderstood people, weird people, kind of mad people, those types of people, right? Have always, and while I may not have experienced the things that you have experienced, my heart has always been with people like you. So, without further ado, I just wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to explain my story and why I'm doing this in the first place, why this channel is up on the internet, and why I deeply care for you and what this channel is supposed to be for. You ready? Perfect. So, I think it should be first stated that this channel exists for the sheer purpose of helping you. I am not trying to build a brand. I am not trying to build an empire or a political movement. I specifically am using these videos for you. I want you to be helped, whoever's watching this. As a Christian, I have often found it really, really angering to me when people say that they're Christian and they don't act on the principles in which they act on, out of fear of social marginalization, out of fear of getting hurt, or out of their own self-preservation. Ever since I was very little, I've always had a very kind of all or nothing type attitude when it comes to things like the truth and loving other people. And if I can thank my parents for all of their dysfunctionalism and all of my family's dysfunctionalism for one thing, I can thank them for that radical fidelity to what is true and what is loving, even amidst the mass suffering that human beings can inflict upon each other and inflict upon me personally. And the horrible decisions that I make based on my own psychological kind of weirdness. So, I was actually inspired to make this channel in my freshman year of college when I figured out that I needed these ideas to go someplace. I had all these ideas that I've been reading about. I had converted to Christianity from a very kind of dogmatic, kind of, very, very dogmatic religious tradition that we'll talk about in a second. It was Christian also, but it's kind of not the point. I found a very, very beautiful form of Christianity that I would like. That's not the, despite this not being, the reason that I'm doing this, I believe this is a vehicle for this, but it's not my main thing, right? I want to love you, to help you, to give you one piece of fire in the dark in this vain, vapid, and cruel world that human beings find ourselves in. I guarantee, whether you are rich, whether you are poor, whether you are gay, whether you are straight, whether you any political ideology under the sun, any weird substrata of ideas that you have personally, you will always have a home here because Christ gave me a home. But I don't push that on people. Christianity is a virtue that is supposed to be lived. I often argue parasitically, but I often, parahesetically, right? Without shame, bold truth-telling. This channel was actually partially inspired by a guy on YouTube that you can probably find. He went viral very, very early on in the 2020s for reading the Iliad in perfect Greek. And this guy was like Appalachian Mountain Man. And I saw that, and I was like, oh, that's so me-core. Like, that is, and he put on the blindfold and everything. Blind poets, bro, I gotta give it to, bro. But I remember watching that video in a pretty, in a part of my life that I'll explain in a second. In a time that was very dark and strange for me. And that video was actually something that I found remarkably comforting because of the unedited nature and the personal talking to the camera type thing that happens. So you're probably noticing also that there are no cuts in this video. None. No cuts. Not a single cut, not a single edit, not a single blurb. None of that. That's also on purpose. I do all of this aesthetically to get across one simple idea. I not only am not trying to build a brand, I also care about you. I want this channel to be something that you feel as if there is a person sitting in front of you and talking to you, because I know in this world that we live in, there are few honest people, few good people, and few charitable people. And there are people, thousands of poor people, thousands of suffering people, thousands of mad, strange, out there people, and they just need one person to enter into that place with them and tell them that they love them. And I'm not going to put that under any editing. I'm not going to preserve myself in any way. YouTube algorithm can do what it wants, okay? Because that has always been the mission of this. So, as I mentioned, I have a Twitter, I have a Substack, and I am just a human being. If you've stayed this long in the video, that means you're at least slightly interested, and that is a good thing. And so I will, without further ado, I'm just going to introduce myself to you. And I hope that I would absolutely love to make your acquaintance. And I hope that my testimony leads you further to him over there. But he doesn't have to, because I'm trying to enter into that place where you are. I want you to know that you are not alone. You are worthy of love, and you are worthy of respect, and you are worthy of bread and dignity by mere virtue of you being a human being. All of these things have definitions. All of this has a story. But just know that I have 3 rules with this channel. First and foremost, absolute honesty. I am going to say what I think about something, not because I hate you. If I disagree with you, know that independent of my beliefs, no matter how wacky you may seem, I care about you independent of what I believe about you. I may talk about some very wacky and very scandalous subjects on this channel. I want to do that to help you. I want you to come to terms with some ideas, and I will try to make it as pleasant and as sweet as possible and funny, and something that can maybe comfort you in the landscape that we find ourselves in as human beings. The second rule I have is let's be very careful, no blasphemy. But this kind of blasphemy rule is not really something that I'm going to break, and in the comment section, I expect people to be angry. So it's more of a suggestion, and it's more of a way of thinking. And I apply this rule across the board. I have my own theological beliefs about who God is, but I know that human beings have a wide array of beliefs, right? Because of the way that I believe, right, any overt hatred or mocking of a person based on their religious tradition, or the religious tradition itself independent of substance. So if I insult, let's say hypothetically, if you're a Hindu, if I insult Sue Krishna to your face, that's a no-no to me. Like, I will never do that. I may joke about Krishna, right? But I do that with reverence and regard to the teachings of Krishna. I am also not a Hindu. I do not subscribe to Hindu theology. I do, however, believe that all truth is his. It is all his, and it will forever be his. So anything Sue Krishna or any of the Vedas or any of the teachings of the gurus have to say, that there, he says it. He's there too, you know? So you're probably wondering with all of this, right? I'll be wondering, what the third rule is. And the third rule is no hatred. This one, my friend, is a big one. So when people think about hatred, there is several definitions that people like to throw around, right? Some people, for instance, consider hatred to be a disagreement with someone or upholding of some oppressive hierarchy or system as equivalent to hating them. I'm just going to let you know right now, I find that to be bollocks. Because there is a difference between me saying something that I disagree with you on, and even if it's a principle, even if it's an idea that has been used to hurt people, there is probably a reason I'm saying it in the way that I'm saying it. Epistemologically, if you like those words, you will find a lot of very verbose language in a lot of the things that I do. You will come to notice that the way that I think about epistemology is absolute truth. I am a radical believer in objective truth. I see it all around me every day. I also have a radical love for the subject, and I understand that due to sin, trauma, entropy, all of this kind of stuff, the subject has a inability to see certain things or reacts in very, very volatile ways towards certain subject. And I recognize that. And my goal for what I am trying to do is alleviate that from you. I am not a Christian because I believe it to be something socially ordered. I don't hate anyone. And I don't say that like your Baptist preacher friend that you may know, or the guy who's on the pulpit next Sunday talking about these people are destroying your country. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I've never been that guy, and I don't want to be that guy because I know those guys, and they almost killed me a couple times. We'll talk about that in a second. That's its own story. But hatred to me is the deliberate lowering of someone else's value intrinsic to the human being, or it is devaluing or demeaning that person in regards to their ontology. It is either a devaluing of their value or a hatred or demeaning of their ontology. And this plays itself out in several ways. And I probably end up posting the rules about this in the description. Just know that they exist, and they're more like suggestions. If you break them, just know that you're kind of breaking the spirit of what we do, and there's not really any way to legislate it with YouTube comment sections, but just know that that's kind of how I roll in everything that I do. And I uphold those rules. I apply those impartially. In the blasphemy one, especially for Christianity, don't be insulting Jesus Christ. I'll allow a joke, okay? I'm very much in favor of humor and jokes, as long as it gives, obviously, reverence to the subject that it's making a joke about. Jokes are obviously irreverent, by the way, but I mean in regards to it being a joke. Like, don't make a joke as, like, an actual, like, attack, right? I know that's kind of social, it has social context and all that kind of stuff. I'm aware of that. But that applies doubly for Christianity for me. But, so, those are the three rules. And over the past couple of months, since I've been exploring doing this and writing, I've come up for a funny name for our little escapade and entourage. It's funny, it's affectionate, it has a bunch of internet terms in it. I think you guys will like it. And it's also a reference to some of my books, right? This is what I like to call, as a joke, the International Assembly of Good Fools and Abused Foids. I know that that's a 4chan term. I am merely using that as an affectionate reclaiming of a word that has been used to hurt people and reclaiming it under the context in which it is in. By the way, it's always made no sense to me. People aren't androids. I've never really gotten, not all of them act the same. I've never gotten why people say it, but it's the joke. It's the joke, okay? So this began as, that joke specifically began as a joke about the French National Assembly. In the 1700s, during the French Revolution, there was an assembly that was developed as a response to the General Estates Assembly. And General States Assembly had a bunch of weird rules that often marginalized the poor, and so they're like, nah, making our own government in here. We got all ideas, all people, all citizens, right? That's kind of how I do it, but there's also an affectionate joke about like, oh yeah, it dissolved and they killed each other, but we're not trying to do that again. It's a joke, right? Because the purpose of this is to make you laugh. It is to make you smile, is to heal the pain and suffering of everyday life with very interesting concepts from this little stupid head of mine. So this is what this channel has always been. It is called Caleb W.H. or Valor21Me. Both of those two names are my internet taglines. I may change it to one or the other later, but just know that's what it is. So now, let me move the camera back over here. I'm still adjusting the camera multiple times. My apologies. So now let's get on to my story. You're probably, if you've been here for the now 16 minutes and 28 seconds that this video has been going on for, just know that it's going to be way longer, and but we're getting to the meat and potato. So if you're still here, please stay. Okay, so my name is Caleb. I prefer not to give out my last name, but just know you can call me just about anything. Caleb W.H., Caleb or Lawrence. I am not fussy. I was born in East Texas, specifically the city of Tyler. It's kind of public knowledge now. I think I can say that. If you guys know anything about the region, what you will know is the region is very, very religious and very, very conservative, but there is a sizable progressive minority, and they exist kind of hardcore progressive. And they, I will argue, have pretty good reason for it. And we're going to get into why in a second. But just to let you know, I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal, but I'm also not a progressive. That man is politics to me. And that means something to me. I don't say that as just to be cute, right? I say that with the knowledge that that man came down into the darkest points of my life and pulled me out. And he has done that for other people that I know personally. As a kid, I was born in a very, very restorationist style household. If you don't know what restorationism is, it is a strand of Christianity that came out post-Enlightenment. After the American Revolution, in the Americas specifically, Protestantism took on a really strange form. They didn't like all of the other established traditions, partially because of the Enlightenment, partially because it sounded too Catholic, or it was too traditional. Let's get Jesus. Let's go back to the first century, is what they would say, right? And so multiple religious traditions popped out of this movement. First and foremost, there were the Mormons, or the LDS, or the Latter-day Saints. There were the Seventh-day Adventists. There were the Jehovah's Witnesses, and there was quite a strange one, mine. I'm also skipping over a few, like the Churches of God and the Pentecostal, which technically can be considered post-restoration post-restoration evangelical, but we're not going there. We're sticking with this. I was born in a tradition called Church of Christ. In the 1800s, there were two men named Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell. One of them was a very, very staunch Presbyterian guy, or some kind of minister of the type. And the second one was, I'm not even joking, he was a former Presbyterian minister that was almost a Gnostic. And if you're not familiar, don't worry, I'll explain that in due time. Just know that Gnostics are a group of people in the 3rd century who saw the teachings of Jesus and tried to attach neo-pagan Greek concepts to it, Neoplatonist concepts, and it accidentally created heresy. And by heresy, I'm not saying that to demean. I'm saying that because that actually has like meaning, like that means something. So, um, I was born in a household with two brothers. My twin brother, who is, yes, I was born a twin. My twin brother, who is my best friend and the person that I look up to the most, and also someone who I deeply care about. And my little brother, his name was Reese, and he came when we were 5 years old. When I was 3 years old, my parents took me to a psychiatrist because I was apparently acting different. I was weird. I was too defiant, right? I was breaking all the rules, touching glass a little bit too many times. In the Sunday school class, I'm not even joking. My mom told me this story quite late in our relationship, but I was apparently at 2 years old tied to a chair. I was tied to a chair of a Sunday school lady because I was not listening and too rebellious. That sentiment has led the entirety of the corpus of my life. But as a kid, I was brought to a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me with two things. Technically three. The third one's kind of funny. But two things. ADHD and autism. And I had grown up hearing that I had it, and it wasn't brought up unless like I was being a little cray. And there are times that I've been a little cray before. All right, I'm not gonna front with you, right? But what I was, though, was different. I can remember vividly from very young ages, my mother, who was very devout, right, did care about me, did love me. I now know a lot of the underbelly of that was really screwed up, and we'll talk about that. I had a father as well. He is a very quiet, very stoic man. I'm currently sitting in his apartment right now. And I had actually ended up being born into quite a soft suburban family. At least that's what they want you to think. So it was very, very common for me to be going to church every Sunday. I often remembered I had trouble making friends, but the few friends I did, we were kind of kosher, right? Then came elementary school. My parents ended up taking me to elementary school, and things were great, surprisingly, for a good 2 years. I remember kindergarten and first grade being generally really good, really sweet, really nice. Made a bunch of new friends, but in kindergarten and first grade, what I've noticed is most kids are friends with everyone. This second grade came, and then came something interesting. Second grade, about the age of 4, so 3 years before this, my mom and my dad got divorced. Pretty nasty. Not going to talk about it. I may talk about it at a later date. I'm just not going to talk about it here. My parents and I got divorced, and I can vividly remember when my mom told me that I was maybe 4 years old. This was right after we got into our new house, and it was at night. I remember all of it. It was nasty. But just know that I did get lucky with my dad's and mom's divorce settlement. My dad basically threw the case. He wanted to be in our lives. He was willing to expend any possibility of doing that. And so he has unsupervised visits. He can come see us whenever we want. I have a wonderful relationship with my father. The same can't be said about my mother. Later down the line, I remember going to elementary school in second grade, and I eventually developed getting bullied. I was very different. I had very different ways of thinking. I was very socially inept because of my autism, and that became a big source of people bullying me. People would, and it was I never got to the point where I was getting beat up. Later I did, but I never got to the point at that point where I was getting beat up. Right then it was just social ostracization, getting laughed at, getting punished, that kind of stuff, right? I hit third grade, and things started to get a little bit more nasty. At the beginning of that year, I ended up making a few friends. These few friends ended up not liking me at some point. And I can vividly remember coming to school some days and getting beat up on the playground with rulers. And every single adult at that school not doing a dang thing about it. This started to develop a very, very, a huge distaste of authority. When I wasn't at school, I was usually at home crying. I was at home crying or in my room playing video games. And there are very, very specific stories, whether these are YouTube videos or these are video games or TV shows, that have changed my life. Because at those very dark moments in my life as a kid, that was the place where That was the place where I was able to feel whole again and human again, and I was able to interact with characters and people that I found to be very, very respectful and all that kind of stuff. Um, as I grew older, I remember that the bullying just kept getting worse and worse. I'd be going to school and I'd be crying, getting beat up, and I eventually developed a skill. I call it a skill. It ain't good, but it can get. It ain't good by itself, but it is a skill that can be used to do good. I also tear your life apart, but it is a skill that can be good, and that is anger. I remember developing anger and a massive compassion towards those who were misunderstood and in pain, because that was me, right? I can remember specifically in third, fourth, and fifth grade putting them a fight. If somebody made fun of me, I'd throw a desk. I'd grab a desk and say, "Ain't no way you just did that," right? Every time I go to the principal office, they try to give me a lecture. They try to tell me I'm wrong, and I'm like, "You guys aren't doing anything about these people," right? This developed this kind of constant social agony of being misunderstood and being in pain, ended up developing into a kind of anger, like, this is wrong, injustice is wrong, pain is wrong. And I remember at a very young age also, I was also very astute. I loved to learn because learning felt like stories. Learning about history, real people that existed, that acted in very similar ways to me, awesome. And I always had a love for the kind of obscure moments in history that people don't talk about, whether due to their kind of scandalous or socially weird, but the people that were misunderstood or just not talked about by sheer virtue of them not being, stories that we like to hear, right? It was at this moment I developed an extreme love of revolution. I remember third, fourth, and fifth grade, there were some really good teachers and really bad teachers. I did have a couple of good teachers. And I would be reading these stories about revolt and revolution and overthrowing the people, oppressing the poor and the suffering, right? I'd hear stories about the antebellum South and slavery, and I was enthralled because while I did not obviously understand societal oppression at the time, obviously, we'll get to the whole specifics of that in a second. While I didn't understand what it meant to be, have to go hungry or have to do drugs, I was compassionate in the sense that I was misunderstood because I'd been beat up. I had been hit. My parents had slowly started to harden and started to seem less innocent to me at a very young age because they started treating me very, very harshly and demeaningly. It was around this time after going to church for a long time, which, by the way, at the time, I was very okay with just being a Christian, right? But you get to 8, 9, and 10 years old, and in school, they start bringing up things like evolution and the Big Bang, which now I understand can absolutely exist in this framework. But in my society, that was a no-no. We ain't seen the Scopes monkey trial, apparently. that was looked down upon pretty harshly. In my church, it wasn't like oppressive. I knew some people that get like thrown out of their positions in other churches of Christ, right? But it was all of the restoration kind of like, let's go back to the first century in the most harsh materialistic way possible. And that kind of idea of just the Bible, just don't read anything outside of it, don't learn anything outside of it, be a good man of society, be a soldier, be a police officer, do good things men do, right? And I'm the nerd in the back of class who's reading about all this weird stuff, right? And I'd continue to be that guy, right? But I began to become skeptical because there are people over here that are saying this stuff, right? And then I got my parents telling me this stuff. Who am I supposed to believe? Combine this, I'm getting bullied every day. I'm under, severe mental strain for a child. I'm going home crying in my room in a corner, being all... I'm developing depression. I'm very, very anxious all the time. I fear walking into rooms that are dark. I don't like to be outside for very long. I'm scared of bugs. I was a very, very kind of frail child. Now that kind of stuff is starting to get up there. But keep in mind that to be clear, I am kind of androgynous. You can probably tell by the voice. You can probably tell by the sentiments that I'm getting across. But one thing that this kind of stuff taught me, being, reading this stuff is I could know one thing. This is, my whole life is kind of crashing psychologically, and I make a decision in that moment. I say, if I can't trust my parents, right? If they don't know what's true, then I can't trust anyone. Because my parents, my teachers are also parents, right? They also got kids. So why should I trust any of them? That decision simultaneously was a really good decision and a really bad one. So I considered myself an agnostic. However, I can't say this to people, because if I say this to people that I know, it's off to the races with the social ostracization again. I'm getting thrown out of rooms. I'm getting beat up, and this time it may happen with my parents. When my parents start slapping me, they start hitting me, and I'm like, oh, not my dad, my mom specifically. And so if I can't trust these people, right? They're giving me birthday presents and they're giving me Christmas presents, but they're also like lying to me. They're also beating, they're also, slapping me, right? They're also taking me outside and hitting me over and over again. Like, right? If I can't trust, the people that give me Christmas presents and people who give me food and water and shelter and the bare necessities of my existence, then how can I trust them? And simultaneously, this took me down into a very strange place in my life, a very transitory place in my life that I like to call the Cartesian skepticism arc, or, for what reasons we're about to explain in a second, the Cartesian hedonism arc. During this time period, I had gone through 4 years of harsh bullying from the ages of 6 to about 10 years old. My parents end up realizing, yeah, we're going to need to take this bro to another school because he's going to be with those kids all the time if we don't get him out of here. Around this time, Trump became president, and we ended up getting rid of school choice. That may or may not be the reason I'm still alive, and I'll explain why, but just keep that in mind. So, my 6th grade year, I remember I'm wearing headphones to school. I'm super scared of everything. But because I'm not in the room with those bullies and those kids who used to make fun of me, right? I'm not scared anymore. And so I was like, oh, I can go into places and not be made fun of, right? I can go into rooms and not be kicked out and not be sitting on a bathroom floor, at a hallway floor. I can go and run out. I don't have to run out of class and be angry and throw stuff at people anymore, right? We still did some of that, but there's a reason for it. So, at the age of 11, I was at a certain school that had a in-between life skills and normal kids. This was what you call like the personal training center. And this was the center that they put kids that didn't qualify for life skills, but weren't necessarily okay for the general population at the school. And the people who ran this, by the way, were horrible. Absolute dog water. And I mean that genuinely, because I remember my twin brother went through far worse with them, right? But I went through a lot. I would get tied in chairs, restrained, quote unquote, as if I needed to be restrained. Adults would say horrible things to me, like things about each other, things about kids in the other room. They just say that in front of me, as if I wasn't the person who cared about them. Right? And all throughout all of this, I'm going through a massive crisis in belief. I can't walk into any room and trust anyone. I can't trust my parents when they say that they love me, right? I can't trust anybody on anything. If they're wrong about that, they're wrong about everything. And this is very, very straining for an 11-year-old kid. Very, very straining. I don't really know how to explain to you, because it changed me personally. I have always been very soft. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm very androgynous. I have probably not been through a lot of the very same things that you've been through. I did not have an abusive childhood. I need you to keep that in mind going forward. I've had a dysfunctional childhood. Let's keep going. So at the age of 11, all this stuff was happening. And I remember, as a man, I was exposed to pornography at a very, very young age. You're probably wondering, Caleb, where the heck did you get pornography? The internet, okay? But it was very specific because, as you know, I lived in a very dogmatic, conservative household. That was on people's heads. the whole time, right? That was on me, like, don't touch anything that's wrong. Because I knew that if I, used it, right, and if I used it, then I'm already on the margins anyway, right? But that would be very bad. That could get me kicked out of my house, or my mom to hit me again, right? And that was not something I was willing to do. Okay, so continuing further in this diatribe, I ended up specifically getting exposed to really, really putrid pornography. Like, I wasn't thrown in with your standard categories. Somebody threw a Hail Mary, horrible stuff. For the sake of knowing that there are probably people that are watching this that would be tempted into doing such a thing, I will refrain from talking about it. Just know it may or may not involve animals and mass stuff, right? Bunches of people. I was exposed to that because I was on internet forums. My mom had just allowed me to have the internet. I'm very glad she did, okay, for reasons I'm going to explain. I'm very glad she did, but that was the big cost of doing that. As I'm exposed to this, right, horrible type of pornography, but watching pornography, not that kind, but watching pornography became a kind of rebellion to me. And then, as an 11-year-old, you start using it. You start using more of it because it's more intoxicating to me because I was rebelling against people who were lying to me or misunderstood me. It was an act of quote unquote justice to me. It was a way for me to feel warm and free again. Yes, I'm explaining to you that I did this stuff. Yes, it's socially unacceptable. I don't care. So, long story short, I am an 11-year-old who is going through this giant crisis of thinking. I am going into rooms. My family's getting mad at me. I remember one time, mom and I got in a pretty bad argument, and she called the police on me. It's pretty nasty. And I'm going to school, and I'm getting bullied. Here's the thing. After that year, I ended up changing school districts. This school district ended up being a very, very, very awesome one. And it was a school district that had just gotten pretty hefty on the outside of town. And this school district was so much better than the one in the main city, like leagues better. I wasn't getting bullied all the time. There were more resources. The staff cared. Like, it was insane. It was like a whole new world opened up to me. People care. People care about me, right? Teachers actually gave a crap about me, while this is the Texas school system, so all of the terrible stuff that you probably have experienced if you live in Texas, or if you live in the American school system, it's based off of the Prussian models. They want good workers. They don't want thinkers. They don't want good thinkers. They want people who obey. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But as you know, what ended up happening at this point was I made another decision that impacted me greatly. I was at a new school. I had a new start. And so I had to come to terms in my head what I wanted to do going forward into every single relationship going forward. Because if I do what I did at Owens, I'm screwed, right? If I end up trying for people, that's what I end up thinking about it as. I start wearing their clothes. If I start trying, then I'm not going to get anywhere. What if, hypothetically, I just walk in, balls to the walls, just talk to people. Just do that. It worked. I go, from not being bullied, from being bullied every single day, and being so scared to be in rooms, to walking up to people at random tables who are alone and just sitting down and asking them their name, telling them how they are, telling my story, and they tell me theirs, right? I had to force myself to be rebellious to do social interaction. I had to be angry out of rebellion to do the social interaction, right? And surprisingly, this made me a few friends. Now, after 8th grade, I ended up having to do a rerun of it with slightly more similar people, but chances are it's the same thing. But this did not obviously improve my life. I'm more and more skeptical. I'm more and more scared. I'm still healing from those wounds. And those wounds will, this wound of being misunderstood and being different will probably carry for the rest of my life. Because in middle school, I still have people making fun of me. And I went from having a fight at school maybe once every day, once every 2 weeks. Thank the Lord. because if it's one to every 2 weeks, I just gotta like I don't have to be angry and sad every time. If I'm just getting made fun of, I only gotta scrap once. And no, I was never a fighter. I never got physical. I got in physical fights a couple times, but it's mainly consists of me getting jumped. Like 6 or 7 dudes come and beat me up, throw me in the bathroom, that kind of jive, right? But surprisingly, what ended up happening was during this time, I ended up making more friends. I became more, open with people. I started to act like this and not some very frail child, right? And this was an act of rebellion to me. This was, I've been horribly mistreated. I will make sure that it doesn't happen again. I will go to the other people that are in those places and I will find them before anyone can convince them that I'm nothing. As I'm just, weird or freak or retard or pick a word and use that word, right? I've been called everything under the sun. I don't think there's anything I haven't heard as an insult. Man, whore, retard, pick it all, right? I've gotten it all. And by the way, at these moments, I'm in front of you. If they said something to me, I'm going off. Like, I'm using all the words and more back at them. I remember there's this one fight I got in where this guy called me I told him he's an MS-13. I heard that on the news. I just thought, hey, child rapists, killers, hear that. Like, it was like, what was I on, right? But I'd go to lunch and I'd have people to sit with, to talk with. That was saving. But I'd go home and I'd have to kind of walk on eggshells because I don't want to make my mom mad. I have to go into my room and sit alone, Oh, it was horrible. And the skepticism was mounting. I'm using more and more pornography and I'm eating more and more. At the beginning of middle school, I was about 120 pounds. At the end of middle school, I was 240 pounds. Yeah, I'm big back, right? I'm big back. But what ended up happening to me was throughout all of this, I had been skeptical. I had been reading. If I'm not at school, I am watching YouTube and I am reading. I did so much of that. And by the way, I remember in second grade, I really didn't get to learn how to read from the curriculum. Like, they had this read aloud curriculum that I was like, nah, this is trash. And so I would go look at the library, find the biggest book there, sit down, force myself to read it. That's how I learned to read. It was second grade, and my reading level shot from like nothing to in a year. So that's what I'm doing as a 12 to 13 year old. I'm reading and I'm watching YouTube videos, and I'm watching YouTube videos about pretty heavy subjects because I wanted to be treated equally. And so I'm going to all the adult videos, like politics, philosophy, stories, that kind of stuff, right? I'm getting engrossed in that because at school I got no friends. I don't got nobody to smoke weed in the bathroom with or drink. As if I wanted to do that. Like, I was kind of raised with the idea, and I still think this is like good for me, right? It's kind of raised the idea like, don't touch alcohol, complete sobriety, right? Straight edge. If straight edge were dogmatic conservative parents, right? They're not punk though. I wish they were, but they're not, and they'll never be. But anyway, so at this time, I'm kind of I'm reading all this stuff. I'm reading about politics, revolution. I'm getting involved in I'm going to church less because I'm starting to be afraid that they're wrong. And honestly, when mom said to go to church, you either got spanked, right? I don't want to get hit or spanked or anything like that. So I was like, don't go, right? But if I went, I'd make an excuse and I'd go out to the foyer, right? Just kind of sit there and read or watch a YouTube video, right? So throughout all this, I'm reading all this stuff. I'm playing video games. That's a story for another time. We're not doing that right now. But at 14, I ended up... My apologies, my friend. I'm looking at my charger. Okay. I'm getting exposed to all this stuff. I'm becoming extremely skeptical. And finally, at 14 years old, after my 8th grade year, my family did the unthinkable. You see, if you remember, at the beginning of this whole diatribe about maybe 5 minutes ago, I explained that I was exposed to a really horrid part of pornography. Remember what it was? Animals. It was specifically that, and it was other like adults, people that were supposed to be in power or successful or angels. Sort it out yourself. It's Black Mirror episode 1, like that kind of stuff, right? And so when my mom, I'm already, by the way, uncomfortable by animals as an autistic guy. Like, I can't read them. But getting exposed to that, and then my family, due to my little brother's anxiety issues, ended up getting them a dog. All of the skepticism, all of the distrust of my mom, all of my mother's injustices that I had been treated to, and all of the familial, all of the school issues, all that kind of stuff, all came out at once. It started about me obviously being afraid of the dog because it reminded me of what my mom did. Yes, this is dark. Yes, this deals with very sensitive subjects. That's kind of par for the course for this channel, I think. But the most horrible thing that you could think of, right? That was what I saw, and now I get a reminder of how the adults in my life. And just like that, it snaps. My whole life gets turned into hell because I'm so angry, so unjust, and I've been holding this in for years. This rage, this pain of being misunderstood, and I got nowhere for it to go. So it go into fights. it go into a lot of fights with my mom because my mom genuinely did some horrible stuff. I've done horrible things. She has too, right? I love her. But what I'm about to explain, you need to understand. This was wrong and unjust. It wasn't abuse, but it was heavy amounts of dysfunction and brokenness. Because I've heard abuse stories that to me are far, far in that category. My story is remarkably soft considering what most people had to go through. So for 3 years of my life as a human being, during high school, I would go to high school and I started making some of the best relationships I have ever had in my life. I met my best friend in middle school, ended up leaving after my freshman year, but I was in the choir. And the choir was such a beautiful medicine for me because I could sing. I could sing, and that was something that people knew. And so I was kind of in that role as a singer, right? And I was in choir, and choir has a lot of screamers and a lot of very, 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 very weird people. And those are my people. They've always been, and they will continue to be those people. So I'm meeting people from completely, and I'm doing the same strat as in middle school. Go to the weirdos. Go to the people that nobody talks to. I met my best friend in the world named Jackson. He was a Mormon kid, and he has his own stuff, but I love him to death. I want nothing but his good. And then I started talking to people at other tables. I ended up making friends that I would know in PE named Michael. He's still one of my good friends. I call him the Red Priest, or the Mexican Red Priest. That's a joke about Vivaldi. Nobody gets that. But I also ended up making friends with very other people. In choir, I started to make friends with kind of the strange bunch as well. Teachers ended up to take notice of the fact that I was doing this stuff, right? And some of them, lamentably, did not like it, but about a good 80% of them, they were willing to work with me. If somebody treated me with dignity and care and kindness and respect, I'll go to the grave. Okay, I love good authority figures because those are few and far between in my life. And you got to do a lot to earn it. But if you do earn it, I'll go to the grave for you. All right, I promise you. If you virtuous, then we on the same team. I'll do anything you want me to do. So it was at this time in high school, my freshman year, that I ended up deciding, out of everything that I've read, and I can justify this later, but this is a testimony video. Out of everything that I read, Christianity seemed to be the most logical worldview and the one that was the most believable and provable. Because I had a radical fidelity to the truth and love and virtue. That kind of shaped an objective truth, that shaped my understanding that God was real. He had to be. Just by pure reason alone, he had to be. And I ended up, we'll explain that. That's a thing for another video. Just know that I ended up getting baptized Trinitarianly that year, at 2021. But here's the thing. I believed it as a logical paradigm. My heart was never in it. And more than that, it was in a very, very kind of materialistic, horrible tradition. And that is a whole explanation, but you do need to know that you need to kind of put that in your mind, right? At school, I'm in heaven, and I'm coming back to home with the reminders of all of my wounds, and I'm getting angry, and I'm fighting. I have almost destroyed most every relationship that I have. I'm saying this nonchalantly. It isn't. I am lucky to be found in a place by God, right? But at the time, pure torment on me. Because I'm going to school and I'm still fighting for my right to exist. I'm still fighting those, eventual people that are going to make fun of me, right? But at home, I'm walking on eggshells. I'm going to bed with like screams in my head. I'm getting, me and my mom are scrapping and yelling and screaming at each other, throwing stuff at each other, right? And God bless my mom, but this was horrible for me developmentally, and I ended up at that time, pornography ramped up pretty hard, but I had decided at 14, I was like, this has got to stop. I'm 2 to 3 times a day, plus it's having an effect on my mentality. I don't want that, right? And so I made a decision at 14. I was like, I'll go to the grave fighting this. I'll tear myself in half to fight this. And I did. I'm not clean yet. I'm gonna be straight up with you. But I have gone in my fight. I have gone from using it 1 time a day to 1 time a week to now, as of the last year, 1 time a month. And I'm continuing that fight. And I want you to know, if there's any people that struggle with that, I understand that. I've been there, and I still am there. And here in the assembly, as long as it is a substantive conversation, you have every right to tell your story about that and talk to people about that. Regardless of what you believe, regardless of who you are, you have every right. You do not have the right to tempt other people or to make it into something glorifying, but you can talk about substance there. So, I'm at school. I'm supposedly Christian, and I'm a pretty argumentative guy. I'm debating people, right? I'm going to, if somebody wants to bring up religion, hey, I'll talk religion. We can talk. I prove the existence of God to you. I ended up using the cosmological argument a lot and the teleological argument, right? Good arguments, but I also didn't know how to explain them very well. My rhetoric skills have always been horrible, like genuinely bad. So I ended up making a few friends during this time. Some of relationships that have changed my life. My best friend Jackson, the sweetest guy on the planet, just shy, scrunkly thing, and he is just the sweetest, right? I met someone who has had a profound impact on me, that if you read my Substack, I will refrain from talking about this person except in one other context, called The Muse. And if you're not familiar with art or poetry, as you can probably imagine, I had a slight crush on this girl. But that's not the conversation for right now. That will come later. There's an article about it. I'll put them in the description, and we'll talk about that in a bit. This video is already super long, and it's supposed to be this long because I want to tell people I don't want to make it too, I want it to be cozy, but I also want it to get across the substance of what I'm trying to say. Okay, new thing. Ended up at 14, 15 years old, meeting some new friends. And I'm at school, and I'm doing great. At my home, however, I'm getting in fights every single day, and I begin going to my dad's apartment one day out of the week. And my dad was one of the most beautiful and very, 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 very motivational people in my life. He was one of the few adults in my life that would sit down and explain to me why things were, how they were. He would be willing to talk about these things with me. He would sit and watch TV with me. He'd comfort me when I was sad. These were things that I was devoid of growing up. I was always too hard for people to handle. And I kind of still am, but he was such a beautiful force in my life. But I'm going to his house one day a week, and I'm dreading going back to my parents' house. And then I'm going to school, and I'm dealing with classes. I was always pretty good with classes. I was an A/B student. You give me an assignment, it's dumb. I'll do it, and I'll be out your hair, right? That's kind of how I thought about it. I'll rush through the assignment. I don't care if I get great grades. I just want good grades. I want okay grades. A's and B's. Give me a 3 point something GPA, and we'll get this stepping. But yeah, so I'm in high school and I'm coming to school in the mornings and I'm talking to people. I'm going up to people and I'm making friends. I'm in choir. I'm a guy who sings solos on stage, and people start to realize at that school there were still people that always made fun of me, right? But most people ended up at that moment being like, this is done. We're not going to get this guy to change. He's just him, you know? And that was a very beautiful thing, because I started making a relationship with people that, by the way, previous years before had been bullying me. I have some really good friends in college, right? Who used to bully me. You know, I remember some pretty nasty stories. Like one time when I got in a fight with somebody in junior high, right? When I got in a fight with somebody in junior high, that person, you know, that person's mom will come and bow up to me, right? What are you supposed to do as a seventh grader when you got this bro Bob coming to fight you? I wasn't trying to fight you. I'm fighting him. Like, you know, pretty, that kind of stuff, right? Throughout this time period, all of this, everything that I just explained to you, I developed an extreme affinity for the outcast. And that eventually ended up making me understand that, oh, these people are suffering. There's people that go to my school that go home and get abused. There's people that live in trailers. There's people that are Muslims. There's people, not, by the way, that's not abuse, but like, there's people of different belief systems, right? There's people that are homeless. There's people that fight for the right to exist. I did not have to fight for food, but I did have to fight for my dignity, right? I did have to fight for that. And so I recognize that struggle. I've been there. My heart has always been there. And then throughout high school, I joined, and this changed my life, I joined the debate club. Now in the debate club in a small town, everybody in there progressive, and I was the only guy who was like semi-conservative. I was actually, at one point, I was real conservative. I almost let them win on that, and God forgive me for that. And honestly, progressives became really scary because I began getting tempted by their more nasty sides. God forgive me for that as well. But, and by the way, far left, far right people, you guys are absolutely welcome here. All of you, every single one of you, as long as you follow those 3 rules. Those mean something. We can talk definitions later, but as long as you follow those 3 rules, you'll be kosher, all right? I care about y'all. I really do. So where do I go from here? Well, I ended up joining debate. And I met some really interesting people in there. And people that, while sometimes misunderstanding me, did teach me some things that I needed. At the time I was a Christian, but I was in it for the truth. I was in it for love, right? I was also in it for love. I did care. But I started to notice that a lot of people that were Christians in my life, when push came to shove, they wouldn't go to those people. They were too afraid of hurting their own social reputation or hurting themselves, their jobs, their families, that kind of stuff. And so they wouldn't go to the people who needed it. And this started to get to me really bad. And so I'm in debate, and for cases, I'm reading very, very heavy philosophy. I liked the Enlightenment a lot because rebel, that kind of stuff. But I ended up kind of breaking out of that mold. I was reading Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke was my first philosopher. Edmund Burke is very much a conservative philosopher. He's kind of not. Modern conservatism is very different than Burkean conservatism. But he talked about prudence and measuredness and reform in the context of, and because Edmund Burke witnessed the French Revolution's terror from across the channel, obviously, but he had witnessed her stories. He had probably also seen people that he knew die there, right? This developed an extreme aversion to revolutionary thought. And I had also developed this because I would hear stories from my groups of people, and there'd be one progressive person that get angry at somebody else and they get in a fight. And I was like, this is nasty. I don't want any part of that, right? I recognize now that progressives do care about the poor, but they care about the poor and they're willing to kill the rich, as if the rich, quote unquote, are not just as enslaved as the poor. We'll talk about what I mean by that in a second. But 16, 17, all of this high school arc I call my Pharisee arc because I was on timing, right? I was on timing. I'm debating people on conservative ethics, but I'm like really, really like pharisaical with it. I don't recognize the people behind it. I'm just angry. And I've been angry all my life, but you know, I was kind of living a double life. I would talk about these conservative values, and I'll go home, I'll be an active sufferer of it. Eventually, finally, all of the fights that I've been having, all the times I go to my mom's, every time I go to my dad's, right? I'm at the bottom of the barrel with pornography. I had been fighting it for years, on and off. I got from 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, then I go, then I go back to 1 day, right? And I'm at the bottom, and this is November of 2022. I have one of the most impactful fights with my mom. I got in a fight with her verbally over something, and I was using my phone to argue against something. She got so mad at this that she told me, "Hand me your phone," bowed up to my face. I said, "I'm not giving you my phone. You could," I said, I'm not giving you my phone." At that point, I was done. Like, we had gotten in so many fights. She had gaslit me. She had said so many things. She had hit me so many times. I was like, we're done. Like, you can come get it, right? Is what I said, right? And I'm a big guy at this point. I'm maybe 230, 240. At this time, I'm a big guy, and I'm 5'11", 230, right? I'm pretty stocky. My mom, but by the way, all this, I didn't want to touch my mom. I did not lay a finger on my mom. She could, however, lay a finger on me. She brought me into her room, put me on a bed frame, and punched me 6 times. Said some pretty nasty stuff to me that she has apologized for it, but she has never apologized to my face, and she never gets specific with it. My mom had a dislike of apologizing to people, and especially if socially or social office-wise, she didn't feel obligated to. This was something, obviously, that made me very angry, because you apologize to me regardless, right? That's how I thought about it, right? And so I got hit 6 times in on the frame. I remember that day, I went to bed. I'm saying this nonchalantly because I have the grace to, but I was in bed and I was crying because I said, I don't have family anymore. I don't have a mother. I don't have a mother anymore. That's not a sentence that needs to go through a child's head, right? I was very soft. I was very frail. I wasn't liked anywhere that I went. The hood kids didn't like me. The queer kids didn't like me. The athletic kids didn't like me. The social butterfly kids didn't like me. I was in with the people, regardless of their situation. I was with the people who were in the gutter. Socially, it could be socially, and it could be drug wise and abuse wise, right? But those were where my people were. I always had such a heart for them. I wanted them to understand, right? And I made friends. Some of the best friends I'd ever had were in this gutter themselves. And so at 16 years old, the defining moment of my teenagehood came and went. And that was, I was in the church parking lot, and I had gotten in a fight with the youth pastor's wife. I started arguing. Yeah, something about evangelical and Protestant guys. Ooh, scandalous, right? Yeah, scandalous. We'll talk about that in a second. That kind of get pretty nasty. I don't want to talk about the specifics, but not them specifically, but people in that church were awful. So I began asking questions, people ended up not liking it. So I got in a car with my dad, and I asked my dad a question. I said, why does my mom or someone in authority get to do whatever they want, but when I do the same thing, I'm punished for it? He tried to skirt around the question. He tried to get around it, try to say something about responsibility, and I was like, no, you answer that question. And he said, because she's the adult and you're the child. Or in other words, you have no power. You are below this person. It destroyed me. And I mean that in a very, very literal sense. When I got into that apartment, I grabbed a knife. I held it right here to my chest. And I said, and I was thinking about killing myself. Not because I didn't want to exist, right? But because I wanted my body to finally be protest. I wanted people to understand the pain and the suffering that I had been through, and all of their social, social roles and infallibility and their comfort existed on my suffering. I sit there holding the knife, and I smile, and I drop the knife because I smiled at that. I smiled at that idea. I relished in that idea, and that scared me. It scared me deeply. And so I went into my father's room, And I told him to turn the TV off, and we had a conversation for 5 hours. Long story short, by the end of that conversation, we're both crying. And for the next 2 months, I'm living in his apartment 3 days out of the week, and I'm not going. And I'm going with my mom's 4 days out of the week, and I'm just going to my room and retreating, right? And so, by that time period, I was in the dumps. Pornography 3 times a day. I'm drinking entire jugs of soda, and I'm in such a depressive, manic state that when I go to school, I'm just doing my work and I'm talking. I go to school and I be friendly with people, but at home I'm in hell. I'm in just hell. I'm hearing screams in the back of my head. I'm starting to, all this misunderstanding is like, is this going to be what adult life is like? Turns out, we'll talk about that in a second, but it's going to be what it's like, right? And at the lowest point in my life, and before we get into this, I need you to understand, I'm not a Protestant, I'm not like your flowery person that's going, I will explain to you exactly how it happened, right? I was in my bathroom on the floor crying. Wicked types of pornography, so much food in my system. I'm so depressed and sad, and I'm in hell, basically. I'm shivering and crying, and I crawl into my bathtub. And for the first time in probably a year, I ended up praying. And I say prayer, it was more like a scream. I call out, and I say, Christ, where are you? And what happened next changed my life forever. So I'm going to explain it as empirically as I can. Do you guys know those minimalist paintings that are like one color? So there was a color. So I closed my eyes, and the sense impression, it was not physical. I did not physically see Christ. I need to make that clear. But I did get hit with one of the biggest sense impressions, almost dreamlike sense impressions I had ever gotten in my life, like being punched. Like my whole head was ringing, that kind of stuff, right? On the floor. And Christ is there. I'm explaining what he looked. Now, obviously, this changes person to person, right? Depending on how he chooses to appear to people, how he chooses to speak to people, right? But in my case, he looked like a man he looked like a man who was like shot with like a 10,000 lumen light bulb. You know those like military flashlights that used to be on YouTube for like a long period of time, 100,000 lumens, like light up a whole room type. That was him, but his body, like it almost burned, right? His, normally, as you can imagine, he probably had dark hair, but it was gold, right? His robes were white, completely white. And he came, and he sat down in front of me. And in that bathroom, it felt like a couple hours, right? But it was really probably 30 minutes to an hour. I'm in that room, and I'm crying and sobbing in Christ's arms. And yes, this happened, right? And if I had to describe his voice for you, as it appears to me specifically, and I would argue this probably maybe applies for some people more, it was very punctual. It was measured. He didn't say too much. He didn't overshare, right? He didn't over kind of extend himself. I asked him a question he can't answer. I asked him a question. He sometimes look at me and say, I can't answer that for you. And I'm like, why? It's like, I just can't. The Father does not will it. Long story short, he did not, not grand prophecy. No grand prophecy, no insane kind of seer vision. None of that. I didn't get none of that. I did get one thing. In that conversation, he told me things about my brother and about my best friend and about my family that I didn't know yet. My mom, and he ended up saying about my mom, he said, your mom is broken in ways that she doesn't understand. Be good to your mother. Love your mother, right? So like he said, he said that your mother's broken in ways that that she cannot even understand, let alone you. She said something about my twin brother. Right. And then he looked at me and he said something to me, and it changed the way that I view people. He said, when I made you in your mother's womb, I wanted a boy who would smile at the broken thing and mean it. And I thought about the whole corpus of my life, that was the one thing that people could not objectively beat out of me. He didn't tell me where I was going to go prospect wise. He didn't tell me he didn't tell me what my future was, right? None of that. I pre-lest all that stuff, rebuke it, right? He said that to me. And after that conversation, long story short, I realized after that conversation, I did not want anything but him. I didn't care. I don't care about your culture. I don't care about your social conventions. I don't care about your guys. I don't care about none of that. I don't care about, I wanted him. And I was willing to go to the ends of the earth to find him. So I ended up, after that, I ended up picking myself up and I continued the rest of that year in school. And for 5 months, 5 months, over the summer, all I did was read. If I'm up, I got an audiobook in my ear, or I'm reading something online, or I'm watching a lecture, right? And for 5 months, that was all my brain was doing. I said that it was debate, right? I was reading some philosophic literature, and that's a conversation for another time. Some progressive literature, some Rousseau, some Marat, Marx. I was reading all of them, right? But I was also reading huge amounts of church history. And I credit a few people for doing this for me. There's a channel called Useful Charts that ranks all of the Christian denominations throughout the entire world in this chart. And it's 3 hours long, and he's explaining the entire history of Christianity, right? And the entire history of Christianity, all denominations. Then I checked out Redeemed Zoomer. And Redeemed Zoomer is a Presbyterian. He is a Calvinist, as much as I disagree with the theology of John Calvin. Shout out to all of my Presbyterian friends out there. God bless you. But what you need to know is he is Presbyterian, right? And he was teaching about Christian denominations and the theology of the church. This is when I first started hearing not only about the church, but the church fathers, theologians. Like, they were philosophers, and they were philosophers who cared about God. And I loved them. They were like, it was like my bread and butter. I loved it so much, right? So yeah, throughout all of this, I quit going to Western. I quit going to church, quit walking into church. I quit all that stuff, right? I didn't even want to step in there. Didn't want to step in any of those churches. I did want to find him. I didn't want to know where his church was. I had 5 months of reading, and I read as much stuff as I can get my hands on. I didn't read everything, obviously. I'm not going to say that. There's 2,000 years of that, right? But it is some of the greats. I read people like St. Athanasius. I read people like John of Damascus. I read people like, if you're Catholic, Thomas Aquinas. I love Aquinas. There's a reason for that. We won't explain it. That's for later. That's on my philosophy of love and beauty, which I probably will end up making a video about. I'll probably end up reading my articles out loud, just to make you just to tell you what I think about the subject. But I ended up after all this, a bunch of freaking reading. Like, I'm reading the history. I'm getting real autistic with it. I'm autistic, so I'm getting real autistic with it. So finally, in August, my senior year, after all this pain and suffering, after all this toil, there was something that happened to me personally with a person that I have mentioned in here that opened my eyes to the existence of beauty and love. That's a whole conversation we're not going to have. But just know that all this pain and toil, senior year, I was finally feeling kind of a release. I was depressed. I still deal with some of my demons, but I was feeling some lens of contentment, because when I was at home, I was praying. I wanted to know him. I wanted to experience everything about him, And eventually, I end up getting to what I describe as a phase where I had nailed down 5 Christian denominations that I thought had any semblance of claim. 6 of them. And those 3 denominations were Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, Oriental Orthodoxy, Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, and Anglicanism. And so in my area, there is a church on every corner. Don't mean they do it, right? But there's a church on every corner. I emailed 16 churches, 2 from each denomination if I can get it. Orthodox Church only had 1. And I emailed 15 of those churches. 2 of them were Presbyterian, said they could not get back to me. And one of them was Orthodox. And the guy that answered the phone ended up being my first parish priest, the guy who chrismated me, and a person who ended up changing my life. Not Christ too, but like he was very sweet to me. It was Father David, and he said, he ended up saying, just come and see, like, come, like, we would love to have you, right? Never had anyone answer anything remotely like that. So I drive, and outside the front door is my now sponsor, who we got to talking about. I said, yeah, we're just checking out churches, and he's like, well, come to ours. He was very sweet, and he brought us in, and in that Vesper service, I was standing there, the icons, the incense, and I look into the altar, and the same sense impression, down to the very remote passion that I felt in that shower, the same kind of neptic watchfulness, this honey, this balm, I don't know how to explain it in not poetic terms, so forgive me for that. This kind of watchfulness and love and that kind of stuff was very, very, very present there. And I realized that he also had to be behind that altar. And I ended up going over to a seat, sitting down, head in my hands. And after I walked out, my twin brother, who was his own conversation, looked at me and he said, I bet you $50 you're going to become Orthodox. I said, we're not going to suspend our reason, right? I was not ready to kind of admit it, right? But I was like, we're not going to suspend our reason, because I was rational. I wanted to know that he wasn't there, right? I went to a Lutheran service, and it just didn't, I'm not going to say he wasn't there, right? I believe that there's presence and grace. I don't believe that the sacraments, and I don't think he's present, but he's not intimate there, as intimate as we are in the fullness of the Orthodox Church, right? But I ended up watching a few of those other services online, and I think November of my senior year, I ended up emailing my priest, and I said, I want to do this. I want to become Orthodox. He said, well, we don't have catechesis for a year, but give it a year. See if you still like it. And I started catechesis my freshman year of college, and that's a story for another time. This video has already gone through far too long, as you can see the timestamp on this video. But I was chrismated this April, about 5 months ago, and it has been something that has changed my life. So, I want to end this video off with one thought. Everything that you find here, my Wretched Psalter series, my old rambling logs from when I started, right? My Substack that's be in the description, my Twitter, which will be in the description, my publication being the Substack, which will be in the description, my book links that will be in the description. I have one idea that has carried me through all of this. I believe truly that that Christ, the real God, who was incarnate of the Holy Spirit and the Virgin Mary and became man, descended to us. What tyrant of a God does not enter into it? Who doesn't enter into the place, the bottom, the filth of us? Who doesn't enter into our messy brokenness, our trauma, our pain? What tyrant of a God doesn't do that? What God doesn't stay on his, what God stays on his lofty heights? Voltaire called him the divine clockworker. What tyrant of a God is that? Christ isn't that. And I hope with everything that I say in these videos, I want to will your good. I want to love you, right? I care deeply for people that will be watching these videos. I am by default, I love everyone, and I love everyone particularly for their good. These videos, the publication, the Twitter, all that kind of stuff is to serve him. And I mean that across the board. If you are progressive, if you are gay, if you have abusive parents, if you're traumatized, if you are in the hood, if you've killed someone, if you're if you're on the street walking, you don't know where to go. If you're an Eastern spiritualist or pagan who drinks mushroom tea and read and listens to Hosier, by the way, good taste. I like you for that. If you're a disillusioned man in his basement who's addicted to pornography, if you're a clerical fascist, actual fascist, like not your conservative uncle fascist, no, people like Oswald Mosley, Evola, Hitler, Mussolini, like I've read these people, I've been there, okay? I love y'all too. I care for y'all, and I will your good. I may say something that may will against your sensibilities, but there may be somebody else who needed to hear that, okay? Everything that I say, I pray to God, will be true and will lead you closer to the consolation that I have experienced. I go to bed some nights and I pray, and that is the only consolation I get in my waking life. I still struggle. I still am angry and resentful in my life, right? But that is where my heart is at. I'll save the second half of my story for my other reflections. In the description, if you guys stayed this long, thank you so much, right? Thank you so much for being here. It means so much to me. Whether you are conservative, progressive, gay, straight, black, white, I don't care. I do not care, right? I believe that the kingdom of God belongs to the kingdom. It belongs to the people that no one wanted. The Beatitudes are a consolation for all of us, for all of humanity, and that includes us. And that's why I have this space. In this room, in this cozy space, if you're watching this on your computer, if you're just clicked on a video and you're somewhere outside, if you're going to bed and don't know what to watch, I do this for you because I know what it's like to be margin. I don't know each type of margin, but my heart is with you. And I know the poor aren't some romantic category. I'm not some idealist. I understand the brutal necessity of Christian ethics. It's a cross. It's a cross, and it gonna hurt, right? I hope that my presence makes it an alleviation for you for the struggles of everyday life. And I'm willing to do this for you because he found me. He loved me, even if I'm a terrible person. And I know what love is. I'll explain my philosophy on love, beauty, aesthetics, ethics, all that kind of stuff. But just know this. When I say the good, I mean that absolutely. I'm a virtue ethicist. I believe that love is the choice to will the good of the other in a wholly emptying, kenotic sake. It has no sense of self-preservation, no sense of what happens for me. It is only for your good. And that's why I wake up in the morning when I'm angry or depressed, right? Or I'm angsty like this, right? Or I'm misunderstood, right? And I write the stuff that I write, and I sit here in front of a camera and I say that I love you. We have a catchphrase here, and that is long live the good fool. Christ looks idiotic, misunderstood by people of the world, but he is wise. He is wise because he is God. He is the man who created truth, created love. He is the man that currently supplies your breathing. He is the only reason that you draw breath and you exhale. He's the reason that I do this stuff today, and he is, quite frankly, the reason that I am still alive. So, I say all of this to say that everything that you find on this channel, every last part of it, I do obviously give back to him, but it is for you. This is an act of charity because I know what it's like to be in your position. And we'll talk about all the wacky parts of it later. We'll talk about philosophy. We'll talk about storytelling. We'll talk about anime, storytelling, video games. We'll talk about theology. We'll talk about God. We'll talk about, very, very, subject. I'm an honest guy. I'll say you stuff, Because I have 3 rules. Absolute honesty, no vulgarity, no hatred, and most of all, absolute love. So, with that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. In the description, as I said, there will be my socials, my Twitter, my publication, 3 of my books, and maybe some relevant articles for y'all to see. Thank you guys so much for watching, and God bless you. And of course, long live the good fool.